As soon as my period started, I knew from talking to my friends, and I knew straight away that mine didn't. It seemed to be longer in between and not as predictable as I'd anticipated.
It just was not good, and I was like, oh my god, I could have this. So I was a bit like freaked out. They said we could do an ultrasound. I was like, yes, like I really pushed.
PCOS is a hormonal imbalance and a metabolism problem. It usually affects overall health and appearance of women.
She sits by the window. She used to know the name of every plant on that windowsill. Now she reaches for words, and they're not there. Everyone says, it's just age. She never had children. Nobody told her why. She had irregular periods for most of her life. Doctors called it stress, or her body type, or just the way she was made. What nobody told her, she likely had a metabolic condition, a condition that, left unrecognized, follows a pathway.
A hormonal dysregulation in the communication between your higher brain centers that are sending the messages to your ovaries, as we all sit, to ovulate every month. And because it's dysregulated, you don't ovulate. When you don't ovulate, you don't get a period.
Slowly, silently, over decades, toward the brain. What nobody told her, that condition is now directly linked to dementia, including Alzheimer's disease. This video is about that pathway. It is about 170 million women worldwide who may have had polycystic ovary syndrome and never been diagnosed. And it is about what the science now shows happens to their brains. This video is for educational purposes only. It is not medical advice. If you have concerns about your own health or the health of someone you love, please speak with a healthcare provider. Let's start with what PCOS actually is.
Polycystic ovarian syndrome, or PCOS, is a common disorder that is characterized by a hormonal imbalance and the formation of cysts, which are small fluid-like sacs, in the ovaries.
Because most people, even those who have it, don't fully understand it. Polycystic ovary syndrome is primarily a metabolic disorder. It is not, at its core, about the ovaries. It is about insulin. In PCOS, insulin resistance is the central driver. The body produces insulin, but cells stop responding. Blood sugar stays elevated. The pancreas works harder. Insulin rises, and with chronically elevated insulin come the downstream effects. Elevated androgens, male hormones, a disrupted LH to FSH hormonal ratio, inflammation throughout the body, and in many women, irregular or absent cycles. For millions of women, this went undiagnosed for decades. They were told their irregular periods were normal, that their weight was a lifestyle issue, that their fatigue was stress. They didn't know their metabolic system had been dysregulated since adolescence, and now the science is asking, what happened to their brains? Here is how researchers now understand the progression. Insulin resistance doesn't stay in the body, it reaches the brain. Insulin receptors are found throughout the central nervous system, the hypothalamus, the hippocampus, the seat of memory, the frontal cortex. When insulin signaling breaks down in the brain, neurons lose their ability to efficiently use glucose, their primary fuel. A 2025 review in Frontiers in Endocrinology described this precisely. Insulin resistance in the brain impairs glucose metabolism, increases neuroinflammation, and promotes the accumulation of amyloid beta, the protein that forms the plaques characteristic of Alzheimer's disease. This is why some researchers now use the term type 3 diabetes.
It's an accepted fact people with diabetes have a higher risk of Alzheimer's disease.
Why is Alzheimer's called type 3 diabetes? Type 3 diabetes is a term that was proposed by a team of scientists from Brown University in 2005 to describe the association between diabetes and Alzheimer's disease.
Not as a formal diagnosis, but as a way of describing what Alzheimer's disease, in many cases, appears to be: insulin resistance of the brain. For women who had undiagnosed PCOS, with decades of unchecked insulin resistance and chronic inflammation, this pathway was running in the background long before any memory symptom appeared. The research connecting PCOS directly to Alzheimer's risk is newer, and it is striking. A 2024 study found that women with PCOS showed elevated levels of Alzheimer-related proteins in their blood, including amyloid and tau markers, compared to matched controls without PCOS. These are the same biological signatures that researchers track in Alzheimer's risk assessment. A second 2024 paper examined the mechanisms in detail. Women with PCOS showed disruptions in 3 specific pathways associated with Alzheimer's risk: insulin signaling, tryptophan metabolism, and gonadotropin imbalance, all of which appear to accelerate amyloid beta aggregation. This does not mean every woman with PCOS will develop Alzheimer's. It means the metabolic conditions of undiagnosed PCOS create a biological environment that significantly increases risk over decades silently. There is a second layer to this story. In midlife, every woman goes through the hormonal transition of perimenopause and menopause. Estrogen, which has a protective effect on brain insulin signaling, declines sharply. For women with previously healthy metabolic function, this transition is manageable. For women with underlying insulin resistance, particularly those with undiagnosed PCOS, this hormonal window creates a critical vulnerability. The protective effect of estrogen disappears precisely at the moment the metabolic system is already compromised. Researchers at the Journal of Clinical Investigation 2026, midlife is the front line of Alzheimer prevention in women, not old age. Midlife. Now to the most delicate part of this story. A 2023 systematic review and meta-analysis found an 11% increased risk of dementia or cognitive decline associated with nulliparity, the medical term for never having given birth. But here is what that number means. And what it does not mean. It does not mean that childlessness causes Alzheimer's. It means that the underlying conditions that sometimes prevented pregnancy, unrecognized PCOS, insulin resistance, hormonal dysregulation, are themselves risk factors. The childlessness is not the cause. It is a signal that a metabolic process may have been running for decades, undetected. For many women, the fertility story and the brain health story are the same story. Here is what the science is equally clear about. The brain is not static. Even at 60, even at 70, insulin resistance is modifiable. Neuroinflammation responds to intervention. The brain retains far more adaptive capacity than was believed even a decade ago. The 2025 review on insulin resistance and Alzheimer's identified 4 intervention pathways with consistent evidence. First, improving insulin sensitivity through dietary carbohydrate reduction and time-restricted eating, the same approaches that address systemic PCOS. Second, targeted aerobic exercise, specifically the forms shown to improve both insulin sensitivity and brain-derived neurotrophic factor, BDNF, the brain's own growth and repair signal. Third, deep sleep protection. Sleep is when the glymphatic system clears amyloid from the brain. Protecting slow-wave sleep is direct Alzheimer prevention. Fourth, reducing chronic low-grade inflammation. Research has specifically examined several compounds in this context. Myo-inositol functions as a second messenger in the insulin signaling pathway, the same pathway disrupted in both PCOS and brain insulin resistance. Vitamin D, a 2025 review found it reduces amyloid beta accumulation in the hippocampus and modulates neuroinflammation via NF-κB, the same inflammatory cascade implicated in Alzheimer's pathology. And omega-3 fatty acids, specifically DHA and EPA, associated with lower HOMA-IR in women with PCOS and with reduced microglial neuroinflammation in the brain. Always discuss any supplement changes with your healthcare provider. None of these require a diagnosis. None of them require waiting for symptoms. If you are reading this because you recognize someone in this story, yourself or your mother or your aunt who sat by a window and forgot, here is what to bring to a medical appointment. Ask about fasting insulin and HOMA-IR, not just fasting glucose. Ask about inflammatory markers, CRP, homocysteine. Ask about vitamin D. Deficiency is found in the majority of women with PCOS and has been linked to the neuroinflammatory pathways in Alzheimer's pathology. Ask about cognitive baseline testing, even in the absence of symptoms. And ask whether a plasma amyloid beta test is appropriate, a blood-based marker now available that can detect Alzheimer's-related changes years before clinical presentation. When insulin resistance is confirmed, physicians often discuss metformin, the standard insulin-sensitizing medication. A 2025 paper in Alzheimer's and dementia found longer metformin use correlated with lower dementia. dementia risk, though results remain mixed. Hormone therapy during the menopause transition is a separate conversation, one where timing appears to matter significantly. Both are worth raising with your healthcare provider. You are not diagnosing anyone. You are asking for information that exists and that the person in front of you deserves. She sits by the window. She didn't know. Nobody told her. But you are watching this now, which means the information is reaching you. The science took decades to connect these dots, but it has connected them. Insulin resistance, inflammation, decades of undiagnosed metabolic dysfunction, a brain that slowly lost its fuel supply. This is not inevitable. The generation of women alive today, in their 40s, 50s, and 60s, has something no previous generation had: the science to understand what is happening and the time to act on it. Not for perfection, for more years of clarity, more years of presence, more years of knowing the names of the plants on the windowsill. If you want to take this with you, we've put together a free visual map of everything we covered today: the lab values, the mechanisms, what the research found, all on one page. Printable, shareable. The link is in the description. If this reached someone who needed it, share it. Because the woman who needed to hear this 30 years ago is not here to watch, but the women who need it today are. Subscribe, because this is what this channel is for.